Hello, I'm Jennifer Ann Gordon, and this is number 0738, the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0738. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, you'll meet Gail Merrifield Papp, who is the collaborator and widow of the legendary Joe Papp of New York theater fame. She's the author of Public Private, My Life with Joe Papp at the Public Theater. Why did she write this book 30 years after his death?
I really wanted very much to get across the idea, the democratic idea of Joe's theater and how it started, which has attracted 3 generations of audiences, playwrights and actors who identify with it in the most remarkable way. So I thought it was really important for me to try to get that across to people today, those that remember it and those who don't.
Marta McDowell is the author of Gardening Can Be Murder, How Poisonous Poppies, Sinister Shovels, and Grim Gardens have inspired mystery writers.
You have to put the body somewhere, and the garden is handy in that there's often soil sort of vaguely cultivated, and plus there might just be a shovel handy. You know, if I look around my garden, many of the plants that I like to grow, not because I have a poison garden, but many of them are toxic. And if I just step into my garage where all my tools are hanging up, I go, yep, that could be a weapon. That could be a weapon. And authors have figured that out.
Science writer Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is back. And you know what's back in the news as well? Bennu. Yes, Bennu's coming. But we also have some samples.
This is exciting astronomers everywhere, the fact that they finally have these amazing precious samples from this distant asteroid that really has the potential one day to maybe collide with Earth. There is a risk of it striking Earth in about 159 years from now. Right now, the odds are 1 in 2,700. That's about twice as likely as someone actually finding a 4-leaf clover. But it's also 5 times as likely as someone being struck by lightning.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news and, of course, an idiot of the day. The guest slater, the person who told you this was show number 0738, was Gothic horror novelist Jennifer Ann Gordon, author of The Japanese Box and other stories. She was a guest back on show number 0732. I suggest you go back and listen to that one if you haven't heard it. She's always a phenomenal guest. Thank you very much, Jennifer, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. As 62-year-old Michael Gardner officiated a wedding in Denton, Nebraska on September the 30th, he inexplicably tried to get the attention of the guests by shooting a handgun into the air. Instead, Gardner shot his 12-year-old grandson in the shoulder. Lancaster County Sheriff's Office Chief Ben Huchin said Gardner wanted to start the wedding with a bang. Well, I guess he was accurate with the idea, just not the aim. When he decided to cock back the hammer of this revolver, it slipped. The ammunition was a blank, but Gardner had apparently put black powder into the casing and then glued it. The glue is what injured the child. Gardner was charged with child abuse, said Houchin. The act was not very smart. Really? That's all you got?
Welcome back, Captain Obvious.
Yes, I am!
In Palm Coast, Florida, also on September the 30th, 76-year-old Cheryl Henderson crashed her SUV into a pickup truck. The pickup's driver pulled his truck in front of Henderson's vehicle, hoping to avoid her leaving the scene, but when she started to do just that, he leapt onto her hood and held on for dear life as she raced along for 2 miles, going up to 50 miles per hour. A good Samaritan followed her and nudged her off the road onto the shoulder. Henderson told deputies that she didn't stop because she was out of gas. Huh?
That doesn't even make any sense!
Tell me about it. Even a grammatically incorrect, illiterate country bumpkin knows that.
That don't make no sense!
She was charged with leaving the scene of the crash and aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. The pickup driver didn't suffer serious injuries. Again, I don't know how she could come up with that cockamamie excuse.
That doesn't make any sense.
Not everything does. Not everything has to.
Well, I guess you're right. I mean, I wouldn't have a show without these logic giants. And riding on the hood seems to be a thing. In St. Louis County, Missouri, 38-year-old Stephanie Boyd was charged with domestic assault and resisting arrest on September 28th after she and her husband got into a dispute. Boyd moved to leave the house in a car after the argument, and her husband climbed onto the hood. Boyd drove onto I-70 and continued for 5 miles with him clinging to the vehicle. Finally, an officer stopped them. Boyd's bond was set at $100,000. Well, no matter how this turns out, I'm sure that as the word got out via news media, their insurance premiums shot way up. Elsewhere, I think it's time we should pay teachers more. 28-year-old Brianna Coppage, an English teacher at St. Clair High School in St. Clair, Missouri, was put on leave on September 28th after district officials discovered that she was performing on the pornography website OnlyFans. Coppage claimed she joined the site over the summer to supplement her income. She said, "I knew this day was coming." Well, that's a poor choice of words. Anyway, she went on to say, "The district says they haven't had a decision yet, and I'm just kind of putting the pieces together that I'm not coming back." She said she made an additional $8,000 to $10,000 per month from the site. "I can't control what people think of me. I'm not doing anything illegal. I am a good friend. I am a good family member. That is all I can think about right now." Well, I'm sure that that's all the school board can think about right now, too, and probably a fair amount of the student body as well. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our first guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, the Metropolitan Transit Authority in New York City has had enough of bad behavior on the subway. On October the 3rd, the MTA launched its Courtesy Counts campaign, hoping to encourage riders to practice common decency. Things like don't leave your trash on the train, don't block the doors, use headphones, and of course that Emily Post mainstay, wait until you get home to clip your toenails. Said an MTA senior advisor, "In our busy lives, it's easy to forget that your own individual behavior can have an impact on your fellow rider's commute. The goal isn't to lecture anyone." Yeah, because lecturing a typical New Yorker commuter might get you shanked. Anyway, let's get to our first guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Gail Merrifield Papp is a New York theater icon. She, along with her husband, Joe Papp, established a legendary partnership that built the famous theatrical institution, the Public Theater in New York. Gail has written about those days in her book, Public Private, My Life with Joe Papp at the Public Theater. She joins us via Zoom from New York. Hi, Gail.
Hi, thanks for having me. Nice to be with you.
Thanks for being on the program with us. Now, Joe passed away back in 1991. Why did you wait this long to write this book?
Well, it took me a while to realize that maybe I could write a book. I never wrote a book before. This is my first book. So that took a little bit of a process, but I finally got there, and it took me a little while to do it. But I really wanted very much to get across the idea, the democratic idea of Joe's theater and how it started, which has attracted three generations of audiences, playwrights and actors who identify with it in the most remarkable way. So I thought it was really important for me to try to get that across to people today, those that remember it and those who don't.
Now, you yourself, you have a family that is steeped in theater tradition. You come from San Francisco, and your family was deeply into the theater world. When you came to New York and you started working with Joe, because I'm sure there's a certain bit of a difference when it comes to East Coast versus West Coast. In working with Joe, what did you learn from him, and what did he learn from you in that collaboration?
Well, what I certainly learned from him was the idea of a democratic theater, which back when I started in 1965, this notion had a lot of problems, and it was considered quite radical at the time. Starting with the audiences, who comes to the theater? Joe felt it should be free, especially the kind of theater he started out doing, which was Shakespeare in the parks. And he wanted everybody to be able to have access to those productions, whether they could afford them or even if they couldn't. He didn't feel that should be a barrier. He also wanted to make access in the theater, wanted to change the access in the theater, actually, for actors and playwrights, because back then, many actors who would like to act in Shakespeare were never considered for certain parts because of their color or ethnicity. The same thing applied to playwrights. If they were a black or ethnicity or women, I must add, they were generally discounted and put in, the lesser category of interest. So he wanted to change all of that, and he started out by doing it straight off with free admission to his productions, which was considered extremely radical at that time. So that spirit is really at the core of the organization, and it amazes me how this DNA has somehow transferred over now three generations since he started, and they all feel it very deeply because he was very passionate and powerful speaker and got across what he cared so much about in the theater. So it's created a wonderful community across generations in the theater itself, as well as in audiences.
Well, you talk about the opening up of theater to those who necessarily weren't represented or depicted before. Was that a monumental hill to climb, not only for the audiences and for the backers, but also the groups involved? Because sometimes when a door isn't open to you and you're constantly being beaten down, you might yourself have some trepidation in making the attempt. So did he offer an olive branch to people who said, you're good, you should come and play with us?
Yes, it was more than an olive branch. It was an open door, a window of opportunity that was opened where it had been shut before or partly closed. He just made it part of his life in the theater to do that because Joe had an artistic temperament, and the way he expressed that was through what he produced. So what he produced was his own self-expression, and it was deeply personal as well as other things as far as he was concerned and his motivations for doing it. So he was part of what he did from the very outset when he started the public theater, and also when he started the Shakespeare aspect of his career, which came a little bit earlier. So it was never secondary. It was never an afterthought. It was never a second thought. He understood the problems of doing anything in the theater. There are a lot of challenges, and there was resistance to the kind of plays that he did at the public theater at the beginning, but he just hit back at the critics in a very dynamic way when they weren't able to understand his idea of theater, which some of them just couldn't understand it. They were all attuned to, hit shows on Broadway. That was it. But the idea of a continuity of a theater, the democratic idea at its core, was very strange to many of them in the beginning. And it really did take some effort and years and many challenges to get that established on some kind of firm ground.
One of the things that both of you were very good at was being able to spot talent, young talent. Some of the people who you found and discovered and brought up on the stage are household names and legends today. What's that spark that you used to see in people that you say, he or she, they've got it?
Well, that's it. You just feel it, know it, and recognize it. It's not a matter that you're somehow educated and trained to recognize a talented person. I think anybody can recognize a talented person. Sometimes you can see the way it might grow, but just off the bat, in my own experience, when I, been in the presence of a talented actor, for instance, on the stage, oh my God, that person's just got it. You just feel your connection almost immediately, and they get your attention, they get your interest, and you want to follow them with your eyes on the stage. It's somewhat similar, I think, to spotting plays, which was in my department, because I could tell when words leap off a page in a certain way, and when they don't. When I first read For Colored Girls, great play by Ntozake Shange, the words just leap right off the page at me. I thought, oh my God, I didn't know what it was exactly, but the words just had this tremendous beauty and power. So you recognize that. I don't think it's an arcane talent of any kind. I think everybody can feel that and recognize it.
Well, that's interesting. When you say the words leap off the page at you, when you get a play like that, are you totally engrossed in the words and what they say, or do you also envision, oh, I know who's perfect for this role, or I know an actor who's great for or I know a director who's great for this particular play, or is it just the words and you're enthralled by them?
It's often just the words, but I have to confess that there are certain instances where I read something and I thought, oh my God, I know just the person who could play this, but that's not my role. I'm not a casting director or the director. That's all in the director and the producer's realm of responsibility. But yeah, you do think of certain people, but not always. Sometimes in the case of For Colored Girls, it was just the power of the words alone, because I had no idea who could play these roles. And I didn't know that the author herself was playing in it at various bars and places in the course of its development. I had no idea that, although she became a very good friend of mine, dear friend later on. But it was just the power of the words. And sometimes it's a little tricky reading a script because the words may come along in fits and starts. It may be the way that the playwright has written it in fits and starts. So there's not a great outpouring of eloquence that hits you. It's a different kind of dramatic power that you can sense in how it might be played. So those are just wonderful things in theater that I've enjoyed, appreciated so much.
In writing this book and releasing this book 30 years after Joe's passing, was this a cathartic experience for you to write this book?
I think you're thinking about emotionally. No, because I've been through that, and I've been a collaborator on 3 other projects at the request of their creators, 2 books, 2 other books, and a film. So I've been a research collaborator for those 3 different projects. So I had to come up with a lot of data for them, so forth and so on. The first time out on that kind of collaboration was tough on me because it was so soon after Joe was gone. But since then, I haven't found it difficult. What's difficult was the process of writing, although I got into it, but I'd never written anything before. And I know what's good writing and what's bad writing in prose. So I really worked very hard to get it right. That was difficult, but not the emotional part of it.
It was a battle through the years to mount theater productions and to draw attention to the arts. I'm just wondering if you feel that things have changed. Is it, I guess easier is not the right word, but is it more difficult now to mount a production Are the arts more in danger than they have been in the past, or is it about the same?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, they're much more in danger. It's probably one of those dangerous places for the performing arts, certainly where we are right now, because it's post-pandemic, and there's also a horrible atmosphere in our society right now, which is not very pro-art. But every theater is struggling because the audiences have diminished, funding is diminished, the costs are high, and so there's been quite a bit of reportage about this. But without exception, big theaters and little theaters are really and truly struggling to stay alive. So it's the worst I've ever seen as far as the survivability of theaters is concerned right now. I think some of them will survive, some are not surviving, and I've just never seen anything like it before.
Well, art is very, very important. The theater arts are very, very important to the fabric of life. You and Joe were extremely important to the theater community, and your book, Public, Private, My Life with Joe Papp and the Public Theater, is another important chronicle of that theater community. I thank you very much, Gail, for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Gail Merrifield Papp, author of Public, Private, My Life with Joe Papp at the Public Theater. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0738, and you'll find links to Gail's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order her book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like, but the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestuffileprogram. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. This broadcast is coming to you from upstairs. Get out of the house.
And still to come in the program, we'll touch base with Andrew Fazekas, the night sky guy. You know Bennu's coming, huh? Yeah. Also, we will talk to the author of Gardening Can Be Murder. But we have more Stuff File news to get to right now. And also, by the way, later on, an idiot of the day comes your way as well. Eccentric septuagenarian Reginald Reggie Kinzer is facing federal charges related to a scheme he cooked up to supply erectile dysfunction drugs to members of the Village's retirement community in Central Florida. He allegedly bought $1,800 worth of the medicines with the intent to hawk them in Florida and other states. Reggie was featured in a 2021 documentary about the famous retirement community in which his wife, Anne, gushed.
The Villages has given Reggie an opportunity to grow in different ways.
Again, another poor choice of words. Reggie is shown in the video working out while explaining, "My whole training is about ending my life with a smile on my face. I really like stimulating myself with drugs." Reggie has prior arrests for drug possession. He faces a maximum of a year in prison and a $10,000 fine. Well, honestly, at 77 years old, is he really going to change? And you know, there seems to be a lot going on in that retirement community. Here's another example. Officers responded to reports of a woman passed out on the sidewalk in the Villages. Officers arrived and found 53-year-old Carrie Graber from the nearby city of Bellevue lying on a bench where she'd apparently managed to crawl. They also noticed a puddle underneath the bench and that Graber's jeans were saturated with urine.
You're soaking in it.
Ooh. Police say Graber became belligerent, screaming obscenities at the officers. Her husband showed up and tried to take her home, but she kept yelling and jumping in and out of their car. Officers then tried to take her into custody, but Graber struggled and then pulled her husband's shorts down. Officers were able to arrest her, and she spent 12 days in jail before her husband got her out on a $1,500 bond. She later pleaded no contest to disorderly conduct and resisted arrest and was sentenced to time served plus a fine and court costs. You know, I'm wondering if her husband had trouble coming up with the $1,500 bond, or if he just wanted 12 days of peace and quiet. The township of Bon Cher Valley in Ontario is on a mission to change the name of its most famous street, Harry Dick Road. John Henry Harry Dick was born on the property in 1957, and his family has occupied 3 homes there for 5 generations. Said Harry's wife, Lois Dick, "Well, people think it's very, very funny, and the sign started to disappear." Officials said the sign is stolen about 4 times per year. The family installed a security camera, but it got stolen too. Lois noted that a name change will be a hassle for the family. Any legal document with our address on it is going to have to be changed, she lamented. Harry just wants the thefts to stop. Harry himself said, "All I want is some peace and quietness." Well, you know what? The community and the Dick family should just give the people what they want. Start selling commemorative road signs. Heck, turn their garage into a gift shop. That's a win-win. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, police say a man pried open a roof vent, rappelled down to a beam, and tried to climb down a plastic decoration. The attempt failed. He fell about 15 feet to the floor, where he allegedly ripped cabinet doors off, broke a lock, and caused about $10,000 worth of damage. An employee spotted the thief, who had a butcher knife in one hand, a laptop in the other, and a wheelchair loaded with stolen items. The man ran off, leaving everything except $192 in cash and a set of keys. Minutes later, police found 36-year-old Ted Steinman, who matched the employee's description of the suspect. Steinman allegedly gave officers a fake name, claimed he had a twin, and said his injuries came from someone beating him up. But officers found the stolen items and arrested him. It's not clear where Steinman's injuries were treated or if he was treated at the care spot. By the way, the care spot, that's the urgent care center that he allegedly tried to burgle. Well, that's embarrassing.
Oh dear, what an awkward situation.
And let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program. Marta McDowell is the author of Gardening Can Be Murder: How Poisonous Poppies, Sinister Shovels, and Grim Gardens Have Inspired Mystery Writers. It's a book that asks and answers the question of, what is it about a garden that suits it to literary murder? Marta joins us via Zoom from New Jersey. Hi, Marta.
Hi, Peter.
Thanks for being on the program with us. So I'll ask the question right off the bat. What is it about a garden that suits it to literary murder?
Well, so many things in the garden can kill you, I think is the point.
This is why I stay on terra firma, or mostly on concrete. I'm scared of the garden. But anyway, it's been something, just recently, and I won't give away what show I was watching because I don't want to give a spoiler away. But just recently I saw a show which had a body underneath the garden. And I'm thinking,
yes,
I've seen this a lot.
Well, yes, you have to put the body somewhere. And the garden is handy in that there's often soil, sort of vaguely cultivated, and plus there might just be a shovel handy.
And to be honest, a human body is pretty decent fertilizer.
Oh, that is true. That sounds more like science fiction and Soylent Green. But yes, I suppose that's true. If I look around my garden, many of the plants that I like to grow, not because I have a poison garden, but many of them are toxic. And if I, just step into my garage where all my tools are hanging up, I go, yep, that could be a weapon. That could be a weapon. And authors have figured that out.
Well, I was about to ask, what made you write this book, Gardening Can Be Murder? What was the first impetus to saying, I need to write this?
Well, long ago, maybe 10 years ago, I wrote an article for a little English garden journal called Hortus, and there are lots of British murder mysteries, so that seemed like a fun topic, and I always liked reading them. And then we had this global pandemic where I had a lot of extra time to read, and I thought, ooh, this is a book that I could write without really having access to archives, which was a real problem for researchers, including me, during COVID. So, during the lockdown especially.
So when you started writing this book, did you, or certainly after you finished writing it and you were getting ready to put it out, did you ever concern yourself with the possible idea that this might become a primer to somebody out there?
Well, I think my spouse worried about that. For sure. Here we are in very close proximity, and I'm spending all my time figuring out, various parts of the crime fiction genre and how I could use my gardens in them. But hopefully not. Hopefully not. Yeah, don't try this at home, kids.
It's also interesting that when I think about it, and reading some classic mystery novels, that there's a certain correlation between the detective, or in some cases the amateur detective, and the fact that he or she might also be interested in gardening or a horticulturist.
Yes, absolutely. So from way back when, there have been gardening detectives. People might know Miss Marple. She was one of Agatha Christie's favorite characters to use. She was an avid gardener. Sherlock Holmes wasn't much of a gardener, although Dr. Watson, his sidekick, said he was well up on poisons like belladonna and opium, both of which are plant poisons. And, there have been lots of others. A recent one that I really love, although not a pure detective novel, was Deacon King Kong by James McBride. Love that book. And, there is a shooting, there's an Irish cop, and there's a gardener who plays a key role. So, not just the detectives, but occasionally another person in the story, and very occasionally the suspect.
And I'm thinking, wasn't Nero Wolfe into horticulture as well?
Oh, you bet. You bet. Nero Wolfe was Rex Stout's detective for dozens of mysteries. Rex Stout was a one-man murder mystery factory, practically. And he was this reclusive detective who lived in a New York brownstone and absolutely was smitten with orchids, and so turned his whole penthouse level into greenhouses for his orchid collection.
Which came first, chicken or the egg kind of question? Your interest in horticulture and in gardening, or your interest in mysteries that had horticulture within it?
Wow. So my interest in mysteries started way back with, Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, really childhood reading. Then much later, when I was in my 20s, I really got interested in gardening. And then the connection came after that. So the garden murder mysteries came after the gardening for me. But I was always a reader, and I always loved mysteries.
So do you get excited when you start reading a mystery novel and you don't know anything about it, and suddenly a garden is a focal point in the story that you weren't aware of when you first picked up the book?
Yes, absolutely. Now, of course, sometimes they're like giveaways. Like I started one called, I think it's The Night Flowers. So it's like, oh, okay, well, that's a given. But people will now send me the suggestions for, oh, try this one. In fact, someone the other day said, is white oleander on the list? And I said, rats, I missed that one. So I've put the whole list of 100 plus mysteries up on my website. So if people have suggestions, they can send them to me.
Well, that's interesting. Since you wrote the book and people know your predilection for mysteries and horticulture and gardening, are people literally coming out of the woodwork like the one you just mentioned, saying, saying, "Oh, you got to hear this. You got to read this, or you've got to watch this."
Especially at book talks is what I've been finding lately. But I hope it gets to be an ongoing conversation because it's really fun to share those things. Just like when we're together with our friends, right? We like to say, well, what are you reading? And what are you reading? And what are you streaming? And what podcast are you listening to?
Well, when somebody writes a book, you never really know. I mean, you always hope, but you never really know what the popularity of that book is going to be like. But it's something that you need to get out of yourself to put it down on the paper and finish it. When you finish this book, and now that it's out, was there any surprise at the amount of people who honed in on this particular topic that maybe you didn't think they were aware of, or generally speaking were aware of in the past?
So the real fun to me is to meet other, sort of mystery readers, because I've been more in the gardening world, and I guess I'm not really surprised that it's a huge genre, right? That you go into any bookshop nowadays, right? You go into an indie bookstore and there will be a whole section on mysteries. But I didn't know that many of those people. So it's really fun for me to have a connection with them now because they're not all gardeners, but it's nice to see people on the intersection.
Well, it's a fascinating topic for a book. Do you plan on having, especially now with all this information coming your way, do you plan on having a follow-up to this?
Well, we never know, right? You never know what's going to happen next. I kind of hope that some publisher would be interested in putting out a series of these mysteries that are out of print, long out of print, which you can still get because of Google Books and buying things used, but it would be nice to have them come out in a series again.
Now, when you're going through the research for writing this book, do you focus on the percentage of how much a garden or garden tools play in the direct plot of the story, or does it just have to have the ambiance of a garden, as opposed to it being the prime subject, or not subject, but the prime implement, I guess you can call, of a particular murder mystery?
I know just what you mean. The way I structured the book was to kind of divide up the mystery into that classic formula of, well, you have motive and you have means, and then there's the setting, and we have suspects, and you have a detective. So it let me stretch the definition, Peter, so that I could include some of my favorites, even though it wasn't, sort of the principal storyline. So I'd have to say I stretched it so that I could include the ones that I really loved in a different sort of way.
Well, you are in New Jersey, which is the Garden State. So I'm just wondering now, with this book out and obviously this on your mind for quite some time, when you walk along the city streets of New Jersey or the neighborhoods and you see someone's garden, does your mind wander to, I wonder what they could be hiding or who they might be hiding in this garden?
Well, I will say, if I see a very prominent toxic plant, I do wonder if, does that person have a plan for that? For example, there's this really showy, beautiful, for us it's an annual because it's not hardy here, but it's called castor bean. And it's just this big sort of burgundy leaf plant with these sort of wacky blooms. It grows to be about 8 feet tall in one season, and it will stop people in their tracks visually, but it can also definitely kill them. This is a plant that has been, extracts have been used on the ends of umbrellas to kill like spies and diplomats in London. It's been, I hate to say it, weaponized. Ricin, which is the plant toxin, is really potent. It's the same thing that's in castor oil, only very concentrated. So I always wonder if people know.
Well, hopefully they'll get your book, and they will know. The book is called Gardening Can Be Murder, How Poisonous Poppies, Sinister Shovels, and Grim Gardens Have Inspired Mystery Writers. And I'm sure you're going to inspire many others more. Marta, thank you very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thank you, Peter.
Marta McDowell, author of Gardening Can Be Murder, How Poisonous Poppies, Sinister Shovels, and Grim Gardens Have Inspired Mystery Writers. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0738, and you'll find links to Marta's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order her book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestufffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestufffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Michael Liebling is the author of The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife. It's a page-turning thriller. You say you've read other serial killer novels? Oh, as Michael will tell you, not like this one.
It's not like any serial killer novel you've read before. It really goes behind the scenes. So when I say he takes a wife, you've got to imagine what it's like to be the offspring of somebody who's murdered multiple people. So how do you live with yourself after that? And you were just a kid when it all happened. If you fall in love, how do you tell the woman you love your dad was a serial killer? And how would she react? So the title, it's not entirely clear, but as you get into it, it will become very clear.
The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife. It's a recipe for mystery with a scoop of humor and a sprinkle of horror. The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife. Available now at Amazon and wherever you buy books.
Latitude 47 degrees 14 minutes north. Longitude 84 degrees 39 minutes west. Location Montreal, Canada. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. Now, the Stuff File presents Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy. It's radio that's out of this world.
Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is a member of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada and the author of National Geographic's Backyard Guide to the Night Sky, and also National Geographic's Stargazer's Atlas, the ultimate guide to the night sky. And Andrew, I've been warning for a while, Bennu's coming. But we now have parts of Bennu that scientists can study.
That's right. Yeah, this is exciting astronomers everywhere. The fact that they finally have these amazing precious samples from this distant asteroid that really has the potential one day to maybe collide with Earth. It's considered a near-Earth object, meaning that this 500-meter sized rock, a little bit longer than the Empire State Building in New York City, has the potential to hit Earth at one point. In fact, what's really interesting, and I know, Peter, this is something that you follow, and I don't want to make it more nerve-wracking for you, but there is a risk of it striking Earth, Bennu has, in about 159 years from now. There's a risk of this happening. Right now, the odds are 1 in 2,700 that it would hit. Now, I know that sounds low, 1 in 2,700, but that's about twice as likely as someone actually finding a 4-leaf clover. Just to put that into perspective. But it's also 5 times as likely as someone being struck by lightning. How about that?
Well, it's still better than winning the lotto.
Yeah. Oh, much more so. Look, honestly, the expectations are that these odds will go down. I mean, it will be less risky for us as we learn more about the asteroid, because something of this size hitting the Earth does not happen very often. It's quite rare. We're talking tens of thousands, if not even a million years or more to go by before something like this would hit. But it kind of behooves us that we have the technology now to go out and study these asteroids. So these type. And we think there's tens of thousands of Bennu-like asteroids hanging around Earth's orbit. And so we're cataloging them through our telescopes on the ground, but we're also trying to get up close and personal information about it. So this mission, OSIRIS-REx, that went and actually snagged some of samples off the surface of the asteroid, a 7-year mission called OSIRIS-REx, launched in 2016, took 2 years to get to its destination, went into orbit around Bennu for 2 years, made a very intricate map of the surface, a 3D map. It stunned scientists that the surface of Bennu was actually very mottled and filled with a hodgepodge mix of stones of all sizes. And it was a very risky type of terrain for the spacecraft to be able to touch down and catch a sample. But it actually did that in 2020. And scooped up a sample, put it into a canister, and it's that canister that made a 2 billion kilometer journey back to Earth, and it landed late last month in the deserts of Utah. And that's what now scientists are going to study. And we're talking about a few hundred grams of dirt from Bennu that we're hoping is going to help us understand not only what Bennu is about and maybe perhaps understand how we can mitigate any oncoming collision with it, what would we do with the asteroid itself, but it's also unlocking some of the mysteries of the origins of Bennu. We think it's over 4.5 billion years old, pristine samples that we've collected. It's unlike anything else we've ever gotten a chance to look at.
And also, there is some Canadian technology aboard that spacecraft, and as a result, Canada will be getting a small percentage of the bounty.
Yeah, about 4% of the sample will be divvied up to Canada. Canadian scientists, multiple scientists at different universities, laboratories will have access to this. And this is going to be a boon for Canadian scientists, definitely, in being able to kind of peer back through this special window of time and understand the formation of the solar system. And we think happened, almost 5 billion years ago.
So besides the fact that Bennu is hitting us, maybe there is a need to find another planet that is not in its way that we can all live on. And so from that possibility, apparently there's an Earth-like planet at the end of our solar system?
Well, this is something that's been in the works for a while. A lot of rumors about this possibility of a planet 9, not Pluto this time, but a major planet, a large one, at least the size of the Earth, if not maybe 3 to 10 times the size of our planet. And this is something that astronomers have been searching for because they see the possible gravitational effects of something unknown pulling and pushing other objects, namely what are called Kuiper Belt objects, KBOs. The Kuiper Belt, as you can think of it as a donut-shaped region of hundreds of thousands of rocks of all sizes that orbit the solar system at much farther away than the planet Neptune or even Pluto, the minor dwarf planet. We're talking 10 to 70 billion kilometers away from the sun. Just to put that into perspective, Neptune is on average about 4 billion kilometers away from the sun. So it's just a crazy distance that all of these objects are hanging around. But what we're seeing through our telescope observations is that some of these Kuiper Belt objects, these giant rocks, are being pushed into a certain orbit, like a squashed elliptical orbit, that can only be caused by the gravitation pull of a large object. And it has to be positioned somewhere out beyond the orbit of Neptune and Pluto. the latest calculations that astronomers have done on computers is trying to figure out what this object would theoretically be like and where in the solar system it would be like. So they think it's something on the order of at least 1.5, probably more like 3 to 4 times larger than the Earth. And it's located, somewhere around 7 to maybe 15 billion or maybe even farther, 1 billion kilometers away from the sun, which means if it does exist, we think our telescopes would be able to pick it out. There's about a 90% chance, according to the new computer models, that this Earth-sized world can be picked up by telescopes as long as they know where to look.
Speaking of where to look, one of the things that have a lot of people concerned, especially backyard astronomers, is the idea of light pollution that makes it difficult to look, never mind where to look.
Yeah, this is really interesting. There's a new science paper in the journal Science that's coming out. It's written by a cosmologist and a light pollution expert. And they've come up with coined a new term called noctalgia. Noctalgia meaning kind of the missing of the night, reminiscing of a night that's gone. And so this really speaks to the current situation with light pollution around the world, where humanity is basically being blocked from seeing the night sky that countless generations have been able to do. All these cities, these giant sprawling cosmopolitan centers with lights that are on 24 hours a day is really a problem and has cut generations now of people off of being able to experience the night sky. The night sky has been part of humanity and cultures around the world, deep cultural connections, in fact, and that's being lost. And that's what they're expressing in this latest paper, is that this is a serious issue that really is going to be changing the cultures of around the world too, and something that the experience of seeing like the Milky Way band overhead, being able to see constellations are going to be, a distant memory if we're not going to take hold of being able to control artificial light pollution. And, Peter, what's made it worse, what they've identified is these cheap LED light bulbs that, it sounds great because for the environment because they last for tens of thousands of hours. Problem is that a lot of these commercial buildings that are opting for using these less expensive LED lights may be saving money, but what they're doing is they're many times leaving their lights on 24 hours a day, feeling that because it's so cheap, they can afford to do that. And so this, in a sense, kind of backfired, and hoping that we would have better lighting, it's actually causing people to feel like they can just waste lighting even more. Another problem that was identified in this paper that's really burgeoning and becoming very urgent is satellites that are being put up, especially these internet satellites that you and I have talked about before through SpaceX and Elon Musk's company, putting up space-based internet systems that really kind of democratizes access to high-speed internet wherever you are, even from the most remote locations, through their Starlink system. But they've already put up thousands of satellites, over 3,000. The hopes that they have is having a chain of over 30 to 40,000. This is just one company. But there are many other of these internet-based companies that are popping up that want to do the exact same. So the problem here is already arising that photographs being taken by professional and even amateur backyard astronomers showing these streaks of light that are being caused by these Starlink satellites, basically ruining photography of the night sky, study of the night sky. And the fear is by professional astronomers that there is going to be this nuisance of satellites everywhere. It's like we're in a web of them surrounding our planet.
Well, let's hope that in the future we can still call you the Night Sky Guy. Andrew, thank you very much for being on the program with us once again. Always a treat to have you on.
My pleasure. Clear skies.
Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0738, and you'll find links to Andrew's site to get your own personal autographed copy of his books. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. It's that time once again, boys and girls. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the Strange Things Adults Do. The Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
A former U.S. Army sergeant who worked in military intelligence and carried a top-secret security clearance was arrested and charged with trying to pass sensitive American defense information to China. Federal agents arrested 29-year-old Joseph Daniel Schmidt at the San Francisco airport. He faces one count of trying to deliver national defense information and one count of retention of national defense information. Schmidt served in the U.S. Army from 2015 to 2020. He held a top-secret security clearance, had studied Mandarin, and worked as a team leader in spying operations. Despite his background and training in espionage tradecraft, the details of the investigation suggest that Schmidt did not follow that training in his alleged efforts to pass secrets to China. Those efforts began just over a month after Schmidt left the military when he traveled to Istanbul, Turkey. Investigators say his internet search history at the time includes searches of how to defect, including searching countries that don't extradite, and can you be extradited for treason? While in Istanbul, Schmidt sent an email from his Gmail account to the public email address for the Chinese consulate there. Schmidt introduces himself, explains that he has a top-secret U.S. government security clearance and experience in surveillance detection and running spies. He allegedly offers to share his knowledge with the Chinese government and asks for a face-to-face meeting. 2 days later, Schmidt allegedly created a Word document, yes, a simple Word document, entitled Important Information to Share with Chinese Government. The document, which investigators recovered from Schmidt's Apple iCloud account, boy, this guy is really thick, was later assessed by the Army to contain classified information. In March of 2020, Schmidt allegedly traveled to Hong Kong and then Beijing. While in the Chinese capital, he conducted several Google searches, including what do real spies do and how are they recruited? He also did searches for espionage, and in both cases, he got something from Reddit. Schmidt went on to create more Word documents, again saved to his iCloud account, that contained national defense information, including details on how U.S. Army intelligence trains. I could go on because there's a lot more, but you get the drift. Now, why, oh why, is someone with such a high security ranking so dumb? One reason and one reason only. They're idiots!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0738. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestuffile.com, and once again, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links in all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0738. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, X, Spoutable, Post, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, or you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, TrueTalkRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WLSLLP-FM in Dade City, Florida, KZZHLP-FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. Always remember this very timely piece of advice. Good news is just life's way of keeping you off balance.